The grand concert hall in Vienna was packed that evening. Every seat was filled and people stood in the back, craning their necks to get a better view of the stage. The air buzzed with excitement. Tonight they would witness something special. Tonight they would hear Victor Rostov play. Victor was famous, not just in Vienna but across the entire world. His fingers could dance across piano keys faster than anyone else. Critics called him a genius. Magazines put his face on their covers. When he walked into a room, conversations stopped. People whispered his name like he was royalty. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Victor walked out in his perfectly tailored black suit, his shoes clicking against the polished floor. He didn't smile. He never smiled before playing. He simply nodded once to the audience, sat down at the grand piano and placed his hands on the keys. What followed was breathtaking. His fingers moved so fast they seemed a blur. The music filled every corner of the massive hall. People sat frozen in their seats, afraid that even breathing too loud might disturb the performance. Some closed their eyes and let the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by the way his hands moved. For 90 minutes, Victor commanded that stage. He played pieces so difficult that most pianists wouldn't even attempt them. And he made it look easy. When he finished the final note, the hall exploded with applause. People jumped to their feet, clapping until their hands hurt. Victor stood, took a small bow, and walked off stage without a word. In the crowd sat a 16-year-old girl named Chen Wei. She couldn't see Victor. She couldn't see the stage or the beautiful crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. She couldn't see the red velvet seats or the ornate golden decorations on the walls. Chen Wei had been blind since birth, but she could hear everything. And what she heard was magic. Every note that Victor played she felt in her chest. The fast parts made her heart race. The slow parts made her want to cry. She sat next to her mother, gripping the armrests of her seat, completely lost in the music. When it ended, Chen Wei stood up with everyone else and clapped. Tears ran down her face. Her mother squeezed her hand and smiled, though Chen Wei couldn't see it. After the performance, there was a special event. For those who had purchased the expensive tickets, they could meet Victor backstage. Chen Wei's mother had saved for months to buy these tickets. It was her daughter's birthday present. They waited in line with about 30 other people. Chen Wei held her white cane in one hand and her mother's arm in the other. She could hear people around her talking excitedly about the performance. Some were practicing what they would say to Victor. Others were checking their phones, making sure they looked good for photos. The line moved slowly. Finally, they reached the front. Chen Wei's mother guided her forward. She could smell expensive cologne and hear Victor's voice as he thanked someone for coming. Then it was their turn. Chen Wei's mother spoke first. "Mr. Rostov, my daughter is your biggest fan. She's been listening to your recording since she was a little girl." Victor's voice was smooth and confident. "Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the show." Chen Wei found her courage. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. "Mr. Rostov, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. The way you played Chopin, it was like listening to poetry. I play piano too, and I hope that one day I can—" "You play piano?" Victor interrupted. His tone had changed. There was something sharp in it now, something cold. "Yes, sir. I've been playing since I was 5 years old." There was a pause. Then Victor laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes your stomach drop. Several people in his entourage laughed too. "Playing piano requires seeing the keys, young lady," Victor said. His voice dripped with condescension. "It requires reading sheet music, understanding what the composer wrote on the page. It requires watching your hands, making sure every finger hits exactly the right place at exactly the right time." Chen Wei felt her face grow hot. Her mother's grip on her arm tightened. Victor continued, seeming to enjoy himself now. "I'm sure you play adequately, for someone in your condition. Perhaps some simple melodies. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, that sort of thing." More laughter from the people around him. "But real piano? Concert piano? That requires vision. It requires seeing the music, not just hearing it." "Sir, my daughter has perfect pitch," her mother said, her voice tight with anger. "She can hear a piece once and play it back perfectly. She's been training with one of the best teachers and—" Victor waved his hand dismissively, cutting her off. "I'm sure she's very talented for an amateur. But let's not confuse hobby playing with professional musicianship. There's a reason you don't see blind concert pianists performing at venues like this." He turned to his assistant. Next, please." Just like that, they were dismissed. Someone gently pushed Chen Wei and her mother aside. The next person in line stepped forward, already gushing about how amazing Victor was. Chen Wei's mother quickly guided her away from the crowd. They walked down a long hallway, their footsteps echoing. Chen Wei could feel tears building up behind her eyes. She tried to hold them back, tried to be strong, but they came anyway, hot and angry and humiliating. "Don't listen to him," her mother whispered fiercely. "He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know how hard you work, how talented you are." But the words had already done their damage. Chen Wei had come here full of admiration for Viktor Rostov. She had listened to his recordings hundreds of times. She had dreamed of playing like him one day. And in 30 seconds, he had crushed all of that. Worse, he had made her feel small. Less than. Like her disability meant she could never be a real musician. They took a taxi back to their hotel. Chen Wei stared out the window at lights she couldn't see, thinking about Victor's words. "There's a reason you don't see blind concert pianists." Was he right? Was she fooling herself? What neither Chen Wei nor her mother knew was that someone had recorded the entire encounter. A man standing nearby had pulled out his phone when he heard Victor's tone change. He had captured every cruel word, every dismissive laugh. That night, while Chen Wei cried herself to sleep in a hotel room, that video was uploaded to the internet. By morning, it would have 10,000 views. By the end of the week, it would have millions. And Chen Wei's life would never be the same. But right now, in this moment, she was just a 16-year-old girl who had met her hero and been crushed by him. She lay in the dark, her mother asleep in the next bed, and wondered if she should give up piano altogether. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe she was just fooling herself. She had no idea that in 3 months she would stand on a stage in front of the entire world. She had no idea that she would play music that would make grown men cry and hardened critics reconsider everything they thought they knew about art. She had no idea that Viktor Rostov would kneel before her and apologize. All she knew right now was pain, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and humiliation, a tiny spark of anger was beginning to grow. Chen Wei woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing constantly. Message after message kept coming in. Her mother answered a call, and Chen Wei could hear the excited voice on the other end, though she couldn't make out the words. "What's happening?" Chen Wei asked, sitting up in bed. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Someone recorded what happened last night. It's online. A lot of people are watching it." Chen Wei felt her stomach drop. The humiliation from last night was bad enough. Now the whole world would see it? She wanted to disappear. By noon, the video had been viewed over 1 million times. By evening, it was everywhere. News websites picked it up. Social media exploded. People were furious. How could Viktor Rostov, someone so talented, be so cruel to a young girl? Others defended him, saying he was just being honest. The argument spread like wildfire across the internet. Chen Wei and her mother flew back home the next day. Chen Wei hoped that returning to their small town would mean escaping the chaos. She was wrong. Her phone kept ringing. Reporters wanted to interview her. Strangers sent her messages of support. Some sent hate mail calling her an attention seeker. She stopped going online. She stopped checking her messages. She just wanted it all to go away. 3 days after the video went viral, Viktor Rostov posted an apology on his social media accounts. Chen Wei's mother read it out loud to her. "I want to apologize for my comments to a young fan after my recent concert. My words were taken out of context, but I understand they caused hurt. I have the utmost respect for all musicians, regardless of their circumstances. I wish this young lady all the best in her musical journey." Chen Wei listened without expression. The apology felt empty. Taken out of context? There was no context that could make his words sound better. He had been clear. He had been cruel. And this apology felt like something his publicist had written to make the scandal go away. Her mother felt the same way. "He's not sorry," she said quietly. "He's just sorry people are angry at him." That evening, Chen Wei sat at their old upright piano in their living room. She placed her fingers on the keys but couldn't bring herself to play. Victor's words kept echoing in her head. "There's a reason you don't see blind concert pianists." Maybe he was right. Maybe she had been fooling herself all these years. The next morning, there was a knock at their door. Chen Wei's mother answered it. A woman's voice, warm and familiar, filled the hallway. "Where is she? Where's my girl?" It was Mrs. Catherine Hayes, Chen Wei's piano teacher for the past 11 years. She was in her 70s now, a former concert pianist who had retired from performing decades ago. She had taught Chen Wei everything she knew. Mrs. Hayes walked into the living room where Chen Wei sat on the couch. Without a word, she pulled Chen Wei into a tight hug. "I've been watching this nonsense online," Mrs. Hayes said, her voice shaking with anger. "That arrogant fool doesn't know the first thing about real music." "He's right, though," Chen Wei whispered. "I can't see the keys. I can't read music like other people. Maybe I've been wasting my time," Mrs. Hayes pulled back. Chen Wei could feel the older woman's hands on her shoulders, firm and steady. "Listen to me very carefully," Mrs. Hayes said. "Victor Rostov is technically brilliant. His fingers move fast. He hits every note perfectly. But do you know what he's missing? Soul, heart, feeling. He plays music like a machine. You, my dear, you make the piano sing." Chen Wei shook her head. "Nobody cares about that. They care about being perfect, being fast, being flashy." "That's where you're wrong," Mrs. Hayes said. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said something that changed everything. "What if you proved him wrong?" "What do you mean?" "Victor is performing at a charity concert in 3 months. Big event. Lots of important people. What if you performed there too?" Chen Wei laughed bitterly. "He would never let me on that stage." "He wouldn't have a choice if enough people demanded it," Mrs. Hayes said. "Right now, everyone is talking about what he said to you. People are angry. They want to see him held accountable. What better way than to give you a platform? Let you show the world what you can really do?" Chen Wei's mother spoke up. "Catherine, that's a huge amount of pressure to put on a 16-year-old girl." "I know," Mrs. Hayes said. "But I also know that Chen Wei is the most talented student I've ever taught. And I've taught for 50 years. If anyone can do this, it's her." Chen Wei sat silently. Her mind raced. The idea terrified her. Performing in front of thousands of people? Sharing a stage with Victor Rostov? What if she failed? What if she proved him right? But then she thought about something else. She thought about all the hours she had spent practicing. All the time she had run her fingers over the keys until they ached. All the pieces she had memorized, note by note, without ever seeing a page of sheet music. All of it because she loved music more than anything in the world. Did she really want to give that up because one cruel man said she wasn't good enough? "Okay," Chen Wei said quietly. "Let's do it," Mrs. Hayes smiled. "That's my girl." The next day, Mrs. Hayes contacted Victor's management with a proposal. Chen Wei would perform at the charity concert. It would show that Victor supported young musicians, including those with disabilities. It would help repair his damaged reputation. And if he truly believed in musical merit, he should have no problem sharing the stage with a blind teenager. Victor's team was divided. Some thought it was too risky. Others saw it as the perfect public relations move. After 2 days of discussion, they agreed. The announcement was made on social media. The response was immediate and massive. News outlets called it the Concert of Redemption. Some people were excited. Others were skeptical. Many worried that Chen Wei was being exploited, used as a prop to make Victor look better. Chen Wei didn't read any of it. She had 3 months to prepare for the most important performance of her life, and she couldn't afford any distractions. The rehearsal schedule Mrs. Hayes created was brutal. 6 hours a day every day. They would work on 3 pieces. First, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, 3rd movement. Fast, intense, technically demanding. Second, Chopin's Revolutionary Etude, powerful and emotional. And finally, the big one, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most difficult pieces in all of classical music. "Are you sure about Rachmaninoff?" Chen Wei's mother asked Mrs. Hayes privately. "That piece is incredibly challenging. Even for experienced concert pianists, she can do it," Mrs. Hayes said firmly. "I've heard her play. She has something special, something that can't be taught. We just need to bring it out." The first week of practice was exhausting. Chen Wei's fingers cramped. Her back ached from sitting at the piano for so long. She made mistakes, got frustrated, and wanted to quit at least a dozen times. But Mrs. Hayes never let her give up. Every time Chen Wei hit a wrong note, they would go back and do it again. And again. And again. Until her muscle memory was perfect. Meanwhile, the world watched and waited. Would this blind teenager really share a stage with one of the greatest pianists alive? Could she possibly match his skill? Or would this whole thing end in embarrassment? Victor himself gave several interviews. He was careful with his words now, always saying he wished Chen Wei well and looked forward to the concert. But people who watched closely could see something in his eyes. Confidence, he wasn't worried. He believed that when they both performed, the difference in skill would be obvious. And his reputation would be restored. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Chen Wei practiced in the quiet of her living room, her fingers moving across keys she couldn't see, playing music that came straight from her heart. And with each passing day, she got better, stronger, more confident. The concert was 3 months away, and the whole world would be watching. Week 1 of training nearly broke Chen Wei. Her fingers were stiff and clumsy. Notes that should have flowed smoothly came out choppy and uneven. She kept making the same mistakes over and over, and each one felt like proof that Victor had been right about her. On the 5th day, she slammed her hands down on the keys in frustration. The harsh sound echoed through the small living room. "I can't do this," she said, her voice thick with tears. "It's too hard. I'm not good enough." Mrs. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Stand up." "What?" "Stand up and walk away from the piano." Chen Wei stood, confused. Mrs. Hayes guided her to the couch and sat down beside her. "Do you know why I stopped performing?" Mrs. Hayes asked. Chen Wei shook her head. In all their years together, Mrs. Hayes had never talked much about her own career. "I was 28 years old. I had just finished a performance in London. It went well. The audience loved it. But afterward, a famous critic wrote a review. He said I played with perfect technique but no emotion. He said my music was cold, empty, like a computer program." Mrs. Hayes paused. Chen Wei could hear the pain in her voice even after all these years. "That review destroyed me. I started second-guessing everything. Every note I played, I wondered if it had enough feeling. And the more I worried about it, the worse I got. Eventually, I stopped performing altogether. I was too afraid. But you're an amazing teacher," Chen Wei said. "Thank you. But I've always wondered what might have happened if I had pushed through that fear, if I had kept performing despite what that critic said." Mrs. Hayes took Chen Wei's hands in hers. "Don't make my mistake. Don't let fear steal your music from you." Something shifted in Chen Wei that day. The next morning, she sat down at the piano with a different mindset. She wasn't trying to prove Victor wrong anymore. She was playing for herself. For the love of music. For the way it made her feel when everything else disappeared and there was only her and the piano. The progress came slowly at first, then faster. Her fingers began to remember the patterns. The Beethoven piece started to flow. She could feel the anger and passion in the revolutionary etude, and she let that emotion guide her playing. The Rachmaninoff was still incredibly difficult, but she was getting there. 2 months before the concert, Mrs. Hayes brought in a surprise. Chen Wei heard the living room door open and several people walk in. She could hear the creaking of instrument cases being opened. "What's happening?" she asked. "The Rachmaninoff concerto requires an orchestra," Mrs. Hayes said. "I've called in some favors. These are members of the City Symphony. They've agreed to rehearse with you." Chen Wei's heart jumped. Playing with an orchestra was completely different from playing alone. She would need to listen to all the other instruments, follow the conductor's tempo, and make her piano blend perfectly with the group. The first rehearsal was chaos. Chen Wei missed her entrances. She played too fast in some sections and too slow in others. By the end, she felt defeated again. But the conductor, a kind man named Mr. Peterson, wasn't discouraged. "That was actually pretty good for a first run," he said. "Most soloists take weeks to sync with an orchestra. You'll get there." They rehearsed twice a week. Each session was 3 hours long. Slowly, Chen Wei learned to hear not just her own playing, but how it fit with the violins, the cellos, the flutes, the drums. She learned to feel the conductor's movements through the air, the way the music swelled and quieted. 1 month before the concert, Chen Wei woke up at 3 in the morning from a nightmare. In the dream, she was on stage in front of thousands of people. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys but couldn't remember how to play. People in the audience started laughing. She could hear Victor's voice above all the others mocking her. She didn't go back to sleep. Instead, she went to the piano and played in the dark. Her mother found her there at sunrise, still playing, tears streaming down her face. "Talk to me," her mother said softly. "What if I freeze?" Chen Wei whispered. "What if I get up there and my mind goes blank? What if I embarrass myself in front of the whole world?" Her mother sat beside her on the piano bench. "You know what I think about when I'm scared?" "What?" "I think about 5-year-old Chen Wei. Do you remember when you first started playing? You were so small your feet didn't even touch the floor. You would climb up on this bench and just start pressing keys. You didn't care if it sounded good. You just loved making music. Chen Wei smiled slightly, remembering. That little girl didn't play piano to impress anyone. She played because it made her happy. Maybe that's what you need to remember when you're on that stage. You're not performing for Victor Rostov. You're not performing for the critics or the people watching online. You're playing for that 5-year-old girl who just loved music. The nightmares continued, but Chen Wei kept practicing. Some days were good. Some days were terrible. Mrs. Hayes pushed her hard, never accepting anything less than her best effort. 2 weeks before the concert, a package arrived at their house. Chen Wei's mother opened it and gasped. "What is it?" Chen Wei asked. "It's a dress. For the concert." The dress had been sent by a famous designer who had seen Chen Wei's story online. It was beautiful, her mother said. Deep blue silk that would shimmer under the stage lights. The designer had included a note saying she believed in Chen Wei and would be watching the concert. Messages like this had been arriving for weeks. Letters from children who said Chen Wei inspired them. Emails from other blind musicians thanking her for representing them. Cards from music teachers around the world. But there were negative messages too. People who said she was going to embarrass herself. People who said blind musicians had no place on concert stages. People who said she was only getting this opportunity because of the viral video, not because of her talent. Chen Wei tried not to read any of it, but sometimes her mother would share the good messages. They helped, but they also added to the pressure. So many people were counting on her. What if she let them all down? 1 week before the concert, Mrs. Hayes made an announcement. "No more practicing." "What?" Chen Wei couldn't believe it. "But the concert is in 7 days. You know the pieces. You've practiced them 1,000 times. Now you need to rest. Your fingers need to recover. Your mind needs to be fresh." Trust me, it was torture. Chen Wei's fingers itched to play. She kept hearing the music in her head, worrying that she would forget something important. Meanwhile, preparations for the concert continued. The venue was the same hall where Chen Wei had first met Victor. Tickets had sold out within hours. The live stream was expected to reach tens of millions of viewers worldwide. Victor himself was preparing too, though his approach was very different. He selected his most impressive pieces. Fast, flashy numbers designed to show off his technical skills. In interviews, he remained polite about Chen Wei, always wishing her well. But privately, his team knew he was confident. This concert would remind everyone why he was considered one of the best pianists in the world. 3 days before the concert, Chen Wei, her mother, and Mrs. Hayes flew to Vienna. The hotel was fancy, much nicer than the one they had stayed in before. Chen Wei barely noticed. She was too nervous. The night before the concert, Chen Wei couldn't eat dinner. Her stomach was tied in knots. She lay in bed, unable to sleep, running through the pieces in her mind over and over. Her mother sat on the edge of her bed. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you. You've worked harder than anyone I've ever known. And you've already won just by getting this far." "I haven't won anything yet," Chen Wei said. "Yes, you have. You didn't let fear stop you. You didn't let Victor's cruel words define you. You fought for your dream. That's winning." Chen Wei held her mother's hand in the dark, wishing tomorrow would never come, and at the same time, wishing it was already over. Outside, the city of Vienna slept. The concert hall stood empty and dark, waiting. In less than 24 hours, it would be filled with people, cameras, and lights. 2 pianists would take that stage, and the whole world would be watching to see what happened next. The morning of the concert arrived with gray skies and light rain. Chen Wei woke up at 6, her heart already racing. She had barely slept 3 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself on stage making mistakes, hearing people laugh. Her mother helped her get ready slowly, carefully. Neither of them talked much. What was there to say? In a few hours, everything would be decided. By noon, they arrived at the concert hall. Chen Wei could hear workers rushing around, setting up cameras, testing lights, arranging chairs. The energy in the building felt electric, charged with anticipation. Mrs. Hayes met them backstage. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Terrified," Chen Wei admitted. "Good. That means you care. Now come, let me show you the piano." They walked onto the empty stage. Chen Wei's footsteps echoed in the vast space. She could feel how huge the hall was, could sense the thousands of empty seats waiting to be filled. Mrs. Hayes guided her to the piano. Chen Wei sat down and placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth under her fingers. She played a few notes, testing the sound. The acoustics were incredible. Every note rang out clear and pure. "It's a beautiful instrument," Mrs. Hayes said. "Play something. Get comfortable with it." Chen Wei played a scale, then a simple melody. The piano responded beautifully to her touch. For just a moment, her nervousness faded. This was what she knew. This was home. Backstage, she could hear Victor arrive. His voice carried through the halls, confident and loud. He was laughing with his team, completely at ease. Of course he was. He had done this hundreds of times. The hours crawled by. Chen Wei sat in the dressing room, trying to stay calm. Her mother helped her into the blue silk dress. It fit perfectly, flowing down to her ankles. Her mother brushed her hair and told her she looked beautiful. At 6 o'clock, people started arriving. Chen Wei could hear the murmur of the crowd growing louder, thousands of conversations blending together into a sound like ocean waves. Somewhere out there, critics were taking their seats. Cameras were being positioned. Millions of people around the world were opening their computers and phones, waiting for the live stream to begin. Chen Wei's hands started shaking. She clasped them together, trying to make them stop. "Breathe," Mrs. Hayes said quietly. "Just breathe." At 7:30, an assistant knocked on the door. 15 minutes. Chen Wei thought she might be sick. Her mother squeezed her shoulder. Mrs. Hayes held her hand. "Remember," Mrs. Hayes said, "you're not playing for them. You're playing for you, for that little girl who loved music. Nothing else matters." The announcement came over the speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The concert will begin in 5 minutes." Chen Wei stood up. Her legs felt weak. Her mother kissed her forehead. Mrs. Hayes walked with her to the side of the stage. The lights in the hall dimmed. The crowd fell silent. Chen Wei could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. A voice came over the speaker, welcoming everyone to the evening's performance. Then, "Please welcome to the stage Victor Rostov." The crowd erupted in applause. Chen Wei heard Victor's confident footsteps as he walked onto the stage. The applause continued for almost a full minute before it finally died down. Then Victor began to play. He started with Liszt, a piece famous for its difficulty and speed. His fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note with precision. The music was impressive, technically perfect. Chen Wei stood in the wings listening. He was good. Really good. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. Victor played for 20 minutes, moving from one challenging piece to another. The audience was clearly amazed. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. He stood, bowed deeply, and walked off stage. As he passed Chen Wei in the wings, he glanced at her. He didn't say anything, but she could feel his confidence. He had just delivered a flawless performance, and he knew it. Now it was her turn. The announcer's voice came again. "And now, please welcome Chen Wei." The applause was polite but uncertain. Many people in the audience weren't sure what to expect. Some were there to support her. Others were skeptical. And some, if she was honest, were probably hoping to see her fail. Mrs. Hayes took her arm and walked her onto the stage. The walk felt endless. Finally, they reached the piano. Chen Wei sat down. Mrs. Hayes squeezed her shoulder once, then walked away. Chen Wei was alone now. Alone with the piano and thousands of watching eyes she couldn't see. The silence was complete, waiting, judging. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. She took a deep breath. Then another. She thought about her mother's words, about that 5-year-old girl who just loved making music. And she began to play. The opening notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, third movement, filled the hall. Fast, intense, demanding. But Chen Wei didn't think about the technical difficulty. She thought about the emotion, the anger, the passion, the darkness giving way to light. Her fingers moved across the keys, finding each note from memory. The nervousness started to fade. There was only the music now, only the story she was telling through sound. The piece built and built, faster and faster until it reached its crashing conclusion. Chen Wei struck the final chord and lifted her hands. The applause came, stronger now. She could hear surprise in it. People shifting in their seats, leaning forward. Without pausing, she moved into Chopin's Revolutionary Etude. This piece was different. Where Beethoven had been dark and intense, Chopin was fierce and defiant. It was a piece written during a time of war, full of struggle and determination. Chen Wei poured everything into it. All her frustration from the past 3 months, all the doubt and fear and anger, all the times people had told her she couldn't do something because of her blindness. She played like she was fighting, and in a way she was. The music thundered through the hall. Her fingers attacked the keys with controlled fury. This wasn't just technically impressive. This was raw emotion transformed into sound. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the applause exploded louder than before. People weren't just being polite anymore. They were genuinely moved. But Chen Wei knew the real test was still coming. The Rachmaninoff concerto, the piece that would make or break the entire performance. She stood up and walked to the side of the stage. The orchestra members were taking their positions. Mr. Peterson, the conductor, smiled at her encouragingly. A stagehand brought out a glass of water. Chen Wei drank it gratefully, her throat dry. Her hands were steady now. The nervousness was gone, replaced by something else. Focus, determination, and underneath it all, joy. Because she was doing what she loved, what she was meant to do. The orchestra finished tuning. Mr. Peterson raised his baton. Chen Wei walked back to the piano and sat down. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. The hall fell silent again. Thousands of people holding their breath, millions more watching from their homes. Mr. Peterson's baton came down. The orchestra began. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the air, sweeping and emotional and absolutely beautiful. Chen Wei counted the measures in her head, waiting, listening, feeling the music build. Then, at exactly the right moment, her fingers touched the keys, and something magical happened. From the first note, Chen Wei wasn't just playing the piano, she was living inside the music. Every emotion she had ever felt poured through her fingers. The joy of discovering music as a child, the pain of being told she wasn't good enough, the loneliness of being different, the love of her mother who never stopped believing. All of it became sound. The orchestra followed her lead, swept up in the emotion. The violins sang. The cellos wept. The drums punctuated each phrase like a heartbeat. Mr. Peterson conducted with tears in his eyes, something he would later say had never happened to him in 40 years of conducting. In the audience, people sat frozen. This wasn't just a performance. This was something else entirely. Something that reached past their ears and grabbed their hearts. A famous music critic who had come prepared to write a scathing review found his pen motionless in his hand. An elderly woman in the third row clutched her husband's hand, remembering their wedding dance 50 years ago. A teenage boy who had been forced to come by his parents forgot about his phone and simply listened. Chen Wei's fingers danced across the keys, hitting impossibly complex passages with perfect precision. But technical skill wasn't what people would remember about this performance. It was the feeling, the way the music seemed to wrap around you like a warm embrace, the way it made you remember things you had forgotten, the way it made you feel less alone. Backstage, Viktor Rostov stood watching on a monitor. He had intended to leave after his performance, but something made him stay. Now he watched this blind teenager play, and for the first time in years he felt something crack inside his chest. He had spent his whole life chasing perfection, playing faster, more accurately, more impressively than anyone else. He had won competitions, played in the greatest halls, received standing ovations in every major city. But when had he last played something that made people cry? When had he last played something that mattered? Watching Chen Wei, he realized what he had lost. Somewhere along the way, music had stopped being about emotion and started being about ego, about proving he was the best, about impressing critics and winning awards. This girl, this blind 16-year-old girl, was showing him what real music was. The concerto reached its second movement. Slower now, achingly beautiful. Chen Wei played with such tenderness that people in the audience found themselves crying without knowing why. The melody floated through the hall like a prayer, like a whispered secret, like a love letter to life itself. A mother in the balcony thought about her daughter who had died 2 years ago. A man in the orchestra section thought about chances he had missed, words he never said. A young woman thought about dreams she had given up on and wondered if it was too late to try again. The music touched something in each person, something deep and true and human. Then the third movement began. The tempo picked up, building toward the explosive finale. Chen Wei's hands flew across the keys, the orchestra swelling behind her. The music grew bigger and bigger, filling every corner of the hall, impossible to contain. She wasn't tired anymore, wasn't nervous, wasn't thinking about Victor or the audience or the millions watching online. There was only this moment, only this music, only this incredible feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be. The final section approached. Chenwei and the orchestra moved together perfectly, like they were breathing the same breath. The music climbed higher and higher, each chord bigger than the last, building to something magnificent, and then, with one final crashing chord that seemed to shake the walls, it was over. For 3 full seconds, there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the hall exploded. People leaped to their feet, applauding so hard their hands hurt. The sound was deafening, overwhelming. It went on, wave after wave of applause. People were crying, laughing, shouting. The orchestra members stood and applauded. Mr. Peterson bowed to Chenwei, acknowledging what they had just created together. Chenwei sat at the piano, stunned. She could hear the applause, feel it vibrating through the floor and the air. It was so loud it was almost frightening. She stood slowly, uncertain, and bowed. The applause grew even louder. She bowed again, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Hayes rushed onto the stage and hugged her. The applause continued. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. People didn't want to stop. They didn't want this moment to end. Then something unexpected happened. Victor Rostov walked onto the stage. The audience quieted, confused. What was he doing? Victor walked directly to Chenwei. Mrs. Hayes stepped aside. The hall was silent again, everyone watching. Victor stood in front of Chenwei. Then slowly he knelt down. He took her hand in both of his. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. He wasn't speaking into a microphone, but in the silence everyone could hear him. "I was cruel and I was wrong. You are not just a pianist. You are what every musician should aspire to be." His voice cracked completely. "I have spent my whole life playing music. But tonight, you reminded me what music actually is. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being the fastest or the most technical. It's about touching people's souls. And you did that tonight. You touched everyone here." He stood up, still holding her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for teaching me what I had forgotten." The applause started again, even louder than before. Victor stepped back and applauded with everyone else, applauding for the girl he had once mocked, the girl who had just shown him what true artistry meant. The news of that night spread around the world. The video of the performance was watched hundreds of millions of times. Music schools studied it. Orchestras requested to perform with Chenwei. Offers poured in from every major concert hall in the world. But more than that, something else happened. Children who had been told they couldn't do something because of a disability saw Chenwei and thought maybe they could. Music students who had been focusing only on technical perfection started thinking about emotion and meaning. And people everywhere were reminded that real art comes from the heart, not from how perfectly you can follow the rules. Chenwei returned home a different person. Not because she was suddenly famous, but because she had proven something to herself. She had faced her fear and won. She had turned pain into beauty. She had shown the world that limitations exist only if you accept them. Victor kept his word. He became one of Chenwei's biggest supporters, using his platform to promote her concerts and advocate for accessibility in the arts. He also changed the way he played. His performances became warmer, more emotional. Critics noticed the change. Some said he was finally playing with his whole heart. 3 months later, Chenwei performed at Carnegie Hall. A year after that, she released her first album. It went platinum. She used the money to start a foundation providing free music education to children with disabilities. But the moment she always remembered, the moment that mattered most, was that night in Vienna. Standing on stage, hearing the applause, feeling her mother's pride and Mrs. Hayes's joy, knowing that she had taken all the doubt and fear and pain and transformed it into something beautiful, music had saved her. And in return, she had reminded the world what music could be. She was 16 years old, blind, and she had just changed the world, not by seeing but by helping everyone else see what really mattered. Some things you don't need eyes to understand. You just need to listen with your heart.